The aftermath of the George Zimmerman case and the verdict. For those of you who have been living under a rock and haven't heard what the verdict is, he was actually found not guilty of second-degree murder in the shooting of Trayvon Martin, and he was acquitted on the manslaughter charge that he was also facing. Now, regardless of how you feel about that particular case, there's absolutely no question that there will be ramifications in the future. If you look at stand your ground laws, you will realize that it is not being applied equally and fairly among whites and blacks. There is strong evidence indicating that, and also it sends a strong message that if you are walking alone in a neighborhood and someone is following you around, you have absolutely no right to question that person or defend yourself if you feel that you are being threatened, because that's what Trayvon Martin did. All of a sudden there's some guy thinking that he's suspicious, following him around in a neighborhood when it's getting dark, and as soon as he questioned it, he gets shot. Now, of course, I'm not trying to discount the fact that there was at some point a violent altercation, but the question is, should people be able to follow others around in a neighborhood, and who gets to protect their own lives? Who gets to actually exercise self-defense? In this case, it seems like George Zimmerman had the ability to do so, but Trayvon Martin did not. And of course, there's the demonization of Trayvon Martin after he was shot dead, which I find disgusting, and I want to address that with our panelists. But before we get to all of this, I want to introduce our panelists. We have Neal Brennan, who is a writer, director, comedian, and the co-creator of The Chappelle Show, but is no doubt best known as a former host here on The Point.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sure
great to be back.
People come up to you all the time and say, hey.
Constantly. My life doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the fans.
Anne-Marie Johnson is an actress who's appeared in countless TV shows and movies, including What's Happening Now, In Living Color, and In the Heat of the Night, as well as the former first vice president of the Screen Actors Guild. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm sure you guys all remember Jody David Armour, who is a professor at the USC Law School and a Soros Justice Senior Fellow at the Open Society Institute's Center on Crime, Communities, and Culture, as well as the author of Negrophobia and Reasonable Racism, The Hidden Costs of Being Black in America. Professor Armour, thank you for joining us.
Good to be back with you.
Now, I want to start off by having a broad discussion about race relations in the country, and I know that a lot of you have heard about this again and again, not only on the Young Turks, but on numerous shows. There are pundits on both sides arguing that this case had to do with race baiting and nothing more, but the reality is we have a serious issue in the country, and we have facts and figures to back that up. Now, before we get to all of that, let's watch a video of Eric Holder speaking to the NAACP in Orlando, Florida.
Independent of the legal determination that will be made, I believe that this tragedy provides yet another opportunity for our nation to speak honestly about the complicated and emotionally charged issues that this case has raised. We must not, as we have too often in the past, let this opportunity pass.
Obama also released a statement about the verdict, and I think that the majority of people want to respect the decision that the jury made, but at the same time, people do want to have a broader discussion about race relations. And Professor Armour, how do we go about doing that in a way that doesn't lead to such negative emotions?
Yeah, we have to take it out of the realm of personal fault and start looking at it as a social problem, kind of a problem of social stereotypes and of rational statistics behind some of the profiling that's going on. We have to admit that we have a crime problem in this society, that a disproportionate number of the people who are engaged in violent street crime are of color, are black in particular. You take a group of people, you disproportionately concentrate them in desperate circumstances. It should sadden but not surprise you if they disproportionately turn to desperate undertakings like crime. So there is this kind of lopsided statistical picture that you see when you're looking at crime that seems to justify the profiling, the black tax I call it, and lead someone like Zimmerman to think that he can go ahead and tail someone like Trayvon Martin. How do we get to the bottom of that? We're talking about, I'll just say real quickly, we're talking about major redistribution of wealth and power, getting people out of poverty, which is the correlate of crime. The reason you have so much poverty in the black community is because so much crime in the black community is because of poverty. That's a overhaul I'm not sure we're ready to undertake.
You said something very interesting, and I need, I guess, some you said that the majority of people respected the verdict or should respect the verdict. I completely disagree with you. There's nothing wrong with not being respectful of the decision that they came to. I don't know if you guys watched Juror B37, I believe was the identification. But she was probably one of the most inarticulate individuals I've seen.
And she went on to say that Rachel Jeantel was the most inarticulate.
So this is what I find so fascinating. You had this, I'm presuming, Caucasian woman criticizing the educational shortcomings of an African-American young woman, but the Caucasian woman could not string a sentence together. But no one is commenting on that. But no one in the main media is commenting on that. But the main media spent days, if not weeks, and they still continue to comment on the young African-American woman's lack of articulation.
So just give me a moment to respond to that, because I think you made excellent points. The reason why I say people respect what the jury came up with, even if they disagree with what the jury's verdict was, I disagree with what the jury's verdict was. I think that he should have been convicted of manslaughter. Second degree murder has a higher burden of proof, and unfortunately the prosecutors could not meet that burden of proof, and it is what it is. But the reality is the jurors were the ones that were sitting there from beginning to end in the case. When it comes to the mainstream media's portrayal of the case, we got bits and pieces of what was going on in that courtroom. So I definitely agree that the prosecutors dropped the ball when it came to selecting the jurors. I mean, I feel like the defense got to choose all 6. There wasn't a single black person on that jury. How does that make any sense? So I definitely do feel, how can I say it, a little divided on the issue of the jury itself, but at the same time we have to respect the fact that they were there from the beginning and they got to hear all the evidence, whereas we got bits and pieces.
Is it not possible that they ruled properly on a bad law?
Definitely.
I mean, that's my feeling. I don't think that they were wrong to find him innocent. It's a bad law. That's my feeling.
I agree with you, although I'm not sure it's just the bad law.
Correct.
That same law applied to the Bernard Goetz case in 1986. He shot 4 black youth as they were running away from him on a subway. He was acquitted by a jury. Sean Bell, acquitted by a jury. The folks who shot him, he's a black male. Amadou Diallo.
Bad law. It's the intent, the personalities, and the lack of life experience those 6 jurors had. The majority of those jurors probably had absolutely no intimate relationships with people of color.
But see, my concern about that is that seems to make it boil down to this jury being an anomaly in some way. If you keep getting the same results with different juries, like in the Bernard Goetz case, like in the Amadou Diallo case, like in the Sean Bell case, Oscar Grant was a little different. The Kendrick McDade case here in Pasadena, if you keep getting the same results with different juries, different DAs, different defense attorneys, then you can't just keep blaming it on the trial process yourself. You have to look at the laws themselves, the self-defense law itself, and ask whether self-defense, the way we have it, the doctrine works in this country.
Does it generally work in favor of the shooter?
That's right. Here's how it works.
In most of these cases, all these cases that you're citing?
If an ordinary person under the circumstances would be fearful for his life in your presence, then what you do is reasonable. So does an ordinary person consider gender? Yes. Does he consider age, 80-year-old versus an 18-year-old? Yes.
Race.
Does an ordinary person consider race? Most of my students say yes. When you ask people, we're going to have an honest discussion, we all consider race. Jesse Jackson said, nothing more pains me at this point in my life to walk down the street, start hearing footsteps, and thinking robbery, turning around, seeing someone white, and feeling relieved.
That's correct.
That shows you that certain kinds of discrimination may be rational, even though it's problematic, it's troubling. What makes it rational is it's rooted in crime statistics that are themselves rooted in poverty. There is a disproportionate amount of involvement in crime by poor black youth trapped in ghettos and slums and barrios.
But it goes even further than that. And as a person, we're both in the industry. Our industry has to take responsibility for a lot of the prejudice, the fear, because of the images that we portray day in and day out, which are not true, but they're stereotypical. So
you mean the image of the interracial street gang?
No, right.
That couldn't be less true.
That's
There's a shifty white guy in a ski hat and
exactly.
And a sexy Asian kid all hanging out. Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I do want to focus a little bit on institutional racism and some of the things that you alluded to, because when you really look at the population of black people in America and the number of black people that we incarcerate, I mean, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And I do believe that, the socioeconomic status of blacks in the country leads to more crime. And I love that you mentioned that, because we definitely have a larger issue of poverty and wealth inequality in the country, as well as racism. But we do have to address socioeconomic status. Now, just to give you guys some numbers, when it comes to the people of color in the country, they make up about 30% of the population in the United States. 1 in every 15 African American men and 1 in every 36 Hispanic men are incarcerated, in comparison to 1 in every 106 white men. Okay, so more statistics that I came across today that were just mind-blowing to me. When you look at the sentencing for black convicted felons and white convicted felons, you notice something very different. In the federal prison system, black offenders receive sentences that are 10% longer than white offenders for the same crime. We're not talking apples and oranges here. We're talking apples and apples, or oranges and oranges. It's incredible, and that's according to the U.S. Sentencing Commission. So we see this inequality in all ways, you know what I mean, in many ways. And we continue to deny that institutional racism exists, that discrimination exists. And we see that picture of Trayvon Martin lying on the grass, and I keep bringing this up on the show because I think that this is so indicative of the racism that we have. Look at that picture. So if George Zimmerman had seen a white person wear that exact same outfit, would he think that that person was suspicious?
No.
He would not think that that person is suspicious.
Not a second thought.
He's wearing khaki skinny pants that are cuffed at the bottom. That's not, and I'm making a generalization.
But it even goes beyond that. So it's okay for Justin Bieber to dress in a particular suspicious way, but he's Justin Bieber. He's a white young kid.
Right.
But for an African American kid walking home or walking to the home of one of his parents, he is automatically suspicious.
But here's why, and I'm going to bring in the other side here, because we just have to have it here even to respond to it effectively. The other side of that is they'll say that when you look at the FBI crime statistics, 62% of the robberies, arrests for armed robberies involve blacks, with black males, who make up 6% of the population. So if you don't know anything else about someone except their race and they're coming toward you, you know they're roughly 10 to 12 times as likely to be a robber if they're black than if they're white. Those are hard statistics for us to deal with. That's the honest conversation. That's what Jesse Jackson was talking about. We got to deal with that. How do you deal with that? We got to redistribute wealth and power, but we don't want to do that. That's too radical. We want to go. We instead want to focus on trials and say, oh, this trial went wrong. That should have been a better prosecutor. That should have been a better judge, rather than saying, what we have is a public health problem, stereotypes, social stereotypes. Let's take collective responsibility for that problem.
I understand the collective responsibility, but I kind of understood what Bill Cosby was trying to talk about a couple of years ago. We as African Americans don't have this conversation amongst ourselves. And it's almost like you're a sellout if you actually sit back and go, okay, well, why are our brothers and sisters so violent against each other? We need to have that conversation before we have a larger conversation about race. And we as African Americans do not own up to have that conversation in a public forum, to take responsibilities of our shortcomings, stop blaming whitey just for a second, and start thinking about our own responsibilities. Wow. That's an honest conversation that we refuse to have publicly.
We're going to take a break. You guys are going to have that conversation right now. I'm kidding.
That was a very powerful comment. I got chills while you said that, because you're absolutely right. You don't see that, ever said in the mainstream media, even new media.
Well, you're labeled a sellout, you're labeled an Uncle Tom.
There's embarrassment on both sides, though.
Yes.
So that's your embarrassment, your cultural, racial embarrassment. And then for a white person, I got to say, slavery was embarrassing.
It was more than that.
I mean? No, but as I was like, oh, that's pretty bad. That's pretty indefensible.
So what do you feel about this notion of white guilt? Now when you have white pundits talking about racism in the country and trying to have a genuine conversation about it. And I should note, I get that comment very often. Whenever I talk about racism, people are like, you're suffering from white guilt. I get it, I'm Caucasian, but I'm actually Armenian.
You're part of
I'm Armenian.
A culture that genocide is very familiar to.
Exactly. So
I have white guilt, but I don't see it as a weak. I'm not racked by. I'm not like losing sleep over it. It's just one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, I have a huge advantage. I'm born on third. I was probably born on second. just because I'm Irish and we're not the best type of whites. But I'm born on second, and so there is an inherent advantage in being white. Am I doing much about it? Not really. Am I giving am I like trying to write I mean, I guess you could make a case that I am.
Well, it's effortless. You really don't have to do much about it.
You
It's
don't
effortless.
no one asks you to. So
Right,
when they,
yeah.
to even acknowledge that as a white person I have advantage, it's like your white guilt or white honesty. I don't know, white acknowledgement.
I mean, I like acknowledgement more than guilt because there's this notion that, or the people who accuse you of white guilt make it seem as if there's this notion that racism doesn't exist and
It's
you're
our
just trying to
fault.
overcompensate
Yeah.
for something that happened.
I have
like
a theory
Yeah.
of white guilt coming from an African American woman.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, girl.
Let's hear this.
Here's many young or middle-aged white people, in my opinion, supported Barack Obama to absolve themselves of white guilt and felt I no longer have racial hatred. I no longer have a bias. I no longer have a little second guess about the people of color in my life because I'm going to vote for this black man and vote him into the most powerful position in the free world. I'm not a racist.
Yeah.
And I think it was a little bullet, a magic bullet for a lot of white people
It's
to
a
take.
black
do
friend.
you guys?
It's a black
It's a-
friend.
it's a
my best
black friend
my
writ
yeah,
large.
Hilarious.
That's
Are you guys familiar with Dr. Laura?
Yes.
So when Dr. Laura had her meltdown on KFWB and she used the N-word again and again, she kept trying to make the point to a black caller that we no longer have racism because we elected a black
There
president.
you have
Yeah.
it. Perfect
So I
example.
think that, that's
Well,
an...
we kind of set ourselves up for that. I remember back in 1968, Carl Stokes was the first black mayor elected in a major city.
Who?
And Carl Stokes, Cleveland, Ohio. And everyone thought, oh, things are going to change. Now we have black leadership not only in Cleveland, but Detroit, in Gary, Indiana, in Philadelphia. Pretty soon you not only had black mayors, you had black city councils, black school boards, black dog catchers. And guess what? The plight of the black underclass didn't improve. It got worse from 68 to 85 to 95 with the crack plague, etc. So just having figureheads, black figureheads, has never meant anything for the grassroots in terms of lifting them up.
So let's talk about Obama. Do you feel that Obama has done enough to address race relations in the country?
No.
His idea of race relations is going to the Morehouse School and saying to these graduates who have worked hard at one of the most difficult schools in the country that when you leave this courtyard, make sure you don't fall into laziness and indolence. Make sure that you accept personal responsibility, as though they had to be reminded, as though they might forget. He didn't say that to the Ohio State students.
Right.
He didn't say that to, that's what white privilege is. White privilege is people not presuming anything negative about you, not bothering at
Yeah.
your commencement to say, don't get
Agreed.
lazy
Don't
and
get
accept
lazy.
personal
But
responsibility.
white people don't have any. I happen to experience it secondhand because I have a number of black friends over 20.
Some of your best
Those
friends
are
are
more
black.
than I have.
Yeah, thank you. No kidding. And yet you can't appreciate something that does, like to even have that perspective that Obama, why would he say that to a bunch of black kids and not a bunch of white people can't even think that way.
Well, here's the thing. To give Obama a pass, President Obama, would due respect because he deserves it. His first term, he really couldn't do that. Now,
He definitely
he
can.
really must do it. He has to introduce an honest conversation about race now. There is everyone fears violence, everyone fears and prays for his safety, but we have to have the honest conversation and it must come from him. He's not up for re-election. This is the time to have it. He couldn't have had it his first term. He couldn't have. And it would have been irresponsible if he did have it his first
I
term.
don't think he wants the responsibility. I don't think he's going to. I don't think he wants the responsibility. I think when they get out of office, my guess is Michelle will do a bunch.
Interesting.
But I don't think Barack ever will, because I think he resents having to do it.